All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honeybadger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 379. And now a word from our recent history. We don't have sponsors because we do have patrons, but we don't have sponsors that ask us to give you a word. So you just got to listen to us talk about something that we've already talked about a little bit previously, quite a bit actually, during the past several months, and that is the USAID infection that has gone around the world, the pandemic of USAID that has infected the world under the humanitarian initiative veil. We have a new development that I thought we had better bring to you as soon as we learned about it, rather than waiting until later so that we can finish ragging on UN women. Although we will eventually get back to that because I do want to finish that article. They do have a bunch of bullshit for us to address there too. So
whenever I hear the phrase "new directions," my brain hears nude erections. And whenever I hear the phrase "new developments," I hear nude envelopments. And
there we go.
Some of you may not know what I mean by that, but I'm referring to. It's the top of the show, so I'll have to call it grape. Envelopment is a word we don't use because it means female grape. I just wanted to throw in that bit of poetic license before we start.
Well, it's kind of fitting here because the USAID infection has been primarily spread in the name of protecting women. So there you go. There's quite a bit that they've done that has relied extensively on Gyocentrism historically. But as we talked about previously on several other episodes, the current administration had done some digging into what this agency was involved in, what this organization was involved in, and what your tax dollars as U.S. citizens were being used to do in foreign nations and to foreign nations by UN, or not UN women, but USAID, the USAID system. And so, they defunded it. And of course, the federal offices went into a panic, right? The government offices went into a panic, and they did everything that they could to try to salvage whatever they could, and so on. But there was more to it than that. They really worked hard to try to undermine U.S. interests. So, but before we get into all of that, before we talk about what we're going to talk about today, we do still have to do what we got to do. So, I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator, Lauren Brooks, and you just heard the personification of perceptivity, Mike Stevenson. We also have the Doge in charge in the background.
Hello.
Huh?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. We also have the Doge in charge, Brian Martinez, working in the background to make sure things go smoothly. And tonight, you already know what we're talking about, so I don't have to introduce it. But before we get into that, we do have to do what we got to do. As always, Honeybadger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out, And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platforms tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And with that, we do have some people who decided to help Feed the Badger through feedthebadger.com/justthetip, and I will read off 2 super chows. One of them we missed on Tuesday, and so I'm reading it tonight because we don't want to miss these. And that is from Michael Emmerich Windberg, who gave us. Sorry. Okay, Michael Emmerich Windberg, who gave us $5 and said, in response to something that we talked about regarding protests, I believe, I am reminded of the woman in Iran who was beaten to death by police because she wouldn't wear the hijab. She was killed because she didn't know her place. Obviously, such a thing does not happen to men because men know their place. They know better than to wear beyond the approved attire because no civil war will be fought over them. This also touches something I have mentioned to a friend. Muhammad's wife, Aisha, the woman to whom he pledged to take responsibility, was 6. And I've been told she was 9, but it's still a child. At what age were his soldiers, the boys he forced to take responsibility for his life? Nobody tends to ask this question, I'm afraid. And both of these are interesting things to state. The bit about men knowing their place, something that I'll point out, this is true and not true. In that, men pick their battles, right? They're not going to risk bloodshed so that they do have to wear or don't have to wear hats, or do have the right to wear hats, or cover up their hair, wear a suit to work, or any type of you must wear steel-toed boots on the job, whatever. If you tell a man something like that, he's like, oh, okay, I'll deal with that. That's not what men fight over. Men fight over things like, you are taking half my money and using it to send my son to war when I do my job, right? Then they fight over that. They go protest their government and risk life and limb in civil wars against stuff like that. You are changing our whole way of life, or threatening to change our whole way of life, without a plan for how our economic system is going to survive that, right? Men will start a war over that. You are enslaving our people. Men will start a war over that. If they think they have a chance to win, or they think it's worth being exterminated if they lose.
Try going into a bank as a man, right? Try going into a bank dressed in a niqab. That's the one with just the letterbox over the eyes. You'll soon be arrested as some kind of bank robber, because a man would only go into a bank in that kind of mask if he intends to rob someone, or fuck someone over in some way. Am I talking about the West or the Middle East? Well, it's both. In both of these societies, a man is not permitted to do anything wearing a mask, especially not any situation in which you are expected to show your face. This is something the West and the Middle East have in common. It is only women who are allowed to shroud their face from recognition. How could you be so misogynistic? It's somehow misogynistic in both of these worlds. It's difficult.
Similarly,
it's difficult for people to understand that we have similarities in the West and in the Middle East, and it's that women are allowed to shroud their identities and men are not.
Similarly, it's considered unprofessional for a man to go into a serious professional environment like an office or an institution of education or anything of that nature, right? Go into a business meeting, work as a supervisor somewhere, or even as a salesperson, right? And have his chest showing down to the space between his nipples. A man can't do that and be taken seriously. Generally speaking, you don't see men with bare shoulders in professional environments either, right? Or having their legs show, especially not above the knee.
Or below the knee, or below the ankle.
Right? You don't see any skin aside from the neck up, the wrist down, and that's it. You don't see their toes or their heels or the tops of their feet. You don't see their back all the way down to the waist. If a man showed up at work wearing a bra, you wouldn't know because his clothing is never transparent enough for you to notice that, right? But all of these things, a woman can make all of these things visible to you and be considered professional.
And this extends
in
to
the West.
This extends to China and Japan. This is something that that travel vloggers like to inform us about. Like, if you go to Japan and you're a man, you cannot show your legs, like not above the knee or below the knee or anything to the ankle. It's like in the West when it comes to weddings and funerals. Like, men absolutely cannot show their limbs, anything above the hand or any part of the leg. And they tell us this as though it's completely unfamiliar to us in the West. No, this is almost a global rule that that men's arms and legs are offensive and cannot be shown in any polite situation. And
Yep.
and people are like, yeah, oh, well, this must be a way of oppressing women somehow.
Yeah, and then women act like women are the only ones that get a dress code. It's because men's dress code is universal and largely unspoken. Right? Your boss doesn't have to tell you to wear pants if you're a man. Your boss does have to tell you that your skirt can't show your underwear if you're a woman. Your boss doesn't have to tell you that your areolas can't show through your clothing or outside of your clothing if you're a man. But in some instances, women have had to be told that at work. Now, your boss can't just tell you that without someone in the room either, because they get accused of sexual harassment. Your boss can't. Your boss can't tell you some things. It can't tell you not to wear a skirt, but doesn't have to listen to your complaints about air conditioning. Right? Maybe the air conditioning situation exists because women don't have to dress like men. So yeah, men don't complain about this either. Like there's never a big to do about, gosh, men aren't allowed to wear things they like to wear at work. Only women get to do that. Even on casual days when women might show up, wearing a mini skirt and flip flops. That men don't, for the most part, dress quite that casually.
God, I hope not. I that's not anything I want to see. Especially in my line of work. I don't want any of that. No, thank you, sir and ma'am.
I would prefer that nobody do that, but although I
Yes.
will admit I do like legs. But the workplace isn't the place to be scoping people out either. So
No, it's not.
And I'm not complaining about it either. I don't particularly want to show my arms on my legs. I'm just pointing out the double standard. That
Yeah.
if women want to, they're completely allowed to. And if anyone complains about it, especially men, they're just, no, you're a misogynist. How dare you?
Yep. Oh, my soggy knees. The horror. And it is bad because women will set the environmental temperature at work for the styles of dress that they are allowed to wear. And when men complain that they're too hot, they just call it mansplaining. Even though, like, dude is wearing 3 layers of clothes, right? He has a t-shirt, a business shirt, a button-down shirt, and a suit jacket, and you're in a blouse and a skirt, and open-toed shoes, right, which is why you're cold, and he's not. But yeah, as far as that goes, like, again, it's a know your place thing. Nobody is allowed to criticize women for that. Men aren't allowed to complain about their expectations. And for the most part, you don't hear men getting upset. Women will, you're a misogynist, you're a misogynist, you're a misogynist if you don't think the environment should be set up to facilitate our clothing choices. If I have to wear a sweater to be comfortable in an environment where you're wearing 3 layers of clothing, you're a misogynist. If I have to, even in situations like factory work, what do you mean I have to take off all my bangles and dangles? I want to wear this necklace. What's wrong with you? Oh, you mean the conveyor belt might cut my head off? Well, that's misogynistic. Right? And I had a coworker at a plant that I worked at for a short time lose a finger because she refused to take a ring off when she was working with a conveyor belt, and it got caught on something, and the conveyor belt doesn't forgive, and metal is stronger than every part of your body, so it just ripped it off, kind of slowly, and I guess that's misogyny too, right?
Is it misogyny if I actually want to see that happen?
I didn't want to see that happen. I was sorry that it happened to her, but I was really glad that I was in a different part of the building where I couldn't even hear it. But we all got told about it, because there were a lot of women that were like, "Well, I'm not going to take off my wedding ring." I kept my wedding ring in my wallet while I was working because I like my fingers. I use them for a lot of stuff, and I don't want to lose even one. So, it makes it very hard to type when one of them is injured, especially if it's gone altogether. But yeah, and then the worst part of it is that women will, like, if you dress in more reasonable attire for the environment you're going into, long pants, a long skirt instead of a short skirt, closed-toed shoes, warm outfits, things like that. Women who don't want to do that will accuse you of making things hard for them. They get mad about that too. And of course, the fashion industry run by women. The fashion media industry run by women. So women will complain about women's dress codes that women impose, and women can violate without any further repercussion than other women saying shitty things to you, which, okay, you said something shitty to me. I will now get on with my day. Bye. But some women are just completely devastated if another woman doesn't like their outfit for some reason. I learned to get over that in high school. But yeah, women will bitch about this as though men have imposed it, when in fact, men simply are focused on doing their jobs. And yeah, when men are going to fight for something, they usually pick something that is worth fighting and dying for, because chances are that's what's going to happen, and they know it, and they don't take that risk unless something is so bad that it's better to risk death than to continue tolerating it. Richard Bier gave us $5 and said, "Hannah, I have to apologize to you. There is a 2023 documentary film in 2 parts that is called Pretty Baby Brooke Shields, and it's about her early life as a child actress." So when New Zealand Dingbat was talking about the documentary film Pretty Baby, she likely wasn't talking about the 1978 film, I hope, although she might consider the Netflix Adolescence to be a documentary too. Especially since Parliament was using that mini-series as a foundation to formulate public policy. Okay, well, that makes more sense, because the idea of referring Pretty Baby wasn't about a situation that actually happened, and it didn't have anything in it that examined prostitution or brothels or what life is like in them. It just was gratuitously sexual, and frankly, like I feel like it was abuse to put Brooke Shields in that movie. That she was way too young to be doing something like that, and I think she was aware of what she was portraying, because at one point she had to portray faking an orgasm, and at another a couple of points she had to portray making love to a man, a grown man, as like a 13-year-old. And I believe she was about the age of the character when she did that movie. Hollywood likes to shame adult men as predators, but they did that, right? And they're the ones that the Open Secret documentary was about, where not just one, but many boys have talked about being sexually abused as a result of a system Hollywood used to facilitate their ability to work in movies and television shows. So there's not really a place that's significantly more predatory toward children in the United States than Hollywood. And yet, guess who gets the most criticism from Hollywood? It isn't Hollywood. It's you. They don't like you. They think you're awful. And especially if you don't want your child's school teacher confusing your child about his sexuality and his identity as a human being. So, yeah, both of these are excellent comments and important. But, and I'm glad to know, I thought there might be, there might have been a documentary about that movie, because I remember seeing reference to it in at least one article I read about that. And I remember seeing that movie when I was a kid. Not a young kid, but like high school, and thinking, did her mom agree to her doing that? Because I know my mom would never have let me do that if I wanted to be an actress, which I don't. She wouldn't have let me act in a movie like that when I was a kid. And that wasn't the only one. I don't know if she was an adult or underage. I think she was underage when she did the Blue Lagoon too. So yeah. Then we also have one from Meredith G. Just gave us $5 just now. Said HBR Talk 379. I've been working in an office environment since the 1990s, and there I remember how much problems we faced when business was established. I worked in the financial services industry, which is one of the most conservative dress codes around. Oh yeah, if you're asking somebody to trust you making, for advice or any kind of handling of their money, making their financial decisions, anything, you better look respectable. I'm certainly not going to trust somebody that doesn't look and carry themselves in a respectable manner, and they seem like they're not focused on the job, right? So yeah, particularly if you are client facing. Even when some places went full business casual, the thermostat remained unchanged, not for men's comfort, but because the computer equipment required the temps. I remember that. Back in the day, even before the 1990s, there were a lot of places. I worked at a newspaper, and the building was kept cool. They still were using, they had computers ranging from, at the time, the most up-to-date Apple Macintosh, and back then PCs were called IBM compatible. But they had all that and copy machines and stuff, and then a huge printer that gave off a lot of heat. But their equipment went all the way back to, there was a Commodore 64 that they relied on still for some things because they hadn't updated the way they did those things. Commodore 64 did not have a cooling system. It didn't have a fan. It didn't have anything. So if it was allowed to get overheated, it burned itself out, basically. It damaged itself internally. And just the little metal components on the motherboard would fry, basically. And you would end up with a useless motherboard, and that would be a problem, especially since by that time it was difficult to get another one that worked. So then they would have been in trouble. They would have had to update real quick. In any case, yeah, you did have to keep the temperature low. Any room that had a lot of computers in it, you had to keep the temperature low, because if you let them get overheated, they're a bit fragile toward that. Even when the computers go down, productivity halts. On a side note, if you have a menopausal woman in the office and dare to touch the thermostat, expect to lose a finger. Yeah, that's the other thing, right? The women that are bitching about it being too cold are in their 20s and 30s, and maybe their early 40s. And about the time you start getting pre-menopausal in your late 40s, early 50s, unless you have early menopause and it hits a little earlier, you get the exact opposite. I'm the one that gets overheated at home now if the thermostat's too high. And the other thing is, it's more often women who are slim. When you put on a little weight, especially in combination with being older, you get overheated more easily. And it's a lot easier to put on a sweater if you're a little chilly than it is. There's only so much clothing you can take off, even at work, especially at work. But even at home, even if you're female, there's still only so much clothing you can take off before, like, there's nothing left to remove and you're still too hot. So nobody wants to see a menopausal fat woman do that either. Not very many people, anyway. The ones that do are willing to pay for it.
Nobody even wants to see a physically fit man show his limbs. And I say this to someone with beautifully thick calves, but I'm still not gonna. My calves are not for display in the general public. It's just for me and my dog.
Correct. Those
There
are
you go.
mine.
See, I love that my husband, for years and years, he wore shorts all year round. Like, they were below the knee shorts, but they were still shorts. And so I got to see his calf muscles all the time. And just absolutely love that. But now, like I said, we're in our 50s. This is the first year that, aside from when he has to wear them to work, that he has consistently worn pants instead of shorts. So we're at that age where we're starting to flip the script. But in any case, there's another thing too, by the way. If you're in a northern part of the world, or a southern part of the world below the equator, most of the year, unless your employer pays through the nose to change your work environment, it's going to be chilly as opposed to warm. And here in Ohio, like, I've worked in places where the heating system basically creates an environment that fluctuates between too warm and too cold all day. And you just learn to deal with it, right? But it is significantly easier if you're an asthmatic. It is significantly easier to breathe in temperatures between 60 and 70 than it is upwards of 70. And so it's better if it's chilly and you wear warm clothes than if it's too warm. And it's also a lot cheaper for your employer if they don't have to maintain a temperature above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which I don't know what that translates to Celsius. Sorry, guys. Not something I can do in my head in the moment, because we never have to use that here in the States. But women who are asking for a warmer environment in the workplace, outside of a narrow band around the center of the earth, you're basically asking your employer to pay extra money to make you comfortable so that you can expose your skin to the air instead of covering it up and holding the heat in. So Crazy Cat Gentleman says 70 degrees Fahrenheit is 21 degrees Celsius. So there you go. If your employer is having to keep it higher than that in the workplace, and for me, that's actually too warm. But if your employer is keeping it higher than that in the workplace to make women comfortable, your employer is wasting money.
Yeah, see, I just keep a space heater at my desk because it is always too cold for me. It's kind of the opposite in my situation. They just they keep like the bay door open, and when we receive a delivery, and those guys, they're up, they're about, they're working, they're moving around, and while I'm sat at a desk all day.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well, and you're dealing with a situation where the employer cannot heat the building. If the bay door is going to be open, the temperature is not going to be controlled.
yeah. So
It's difficult to heat a warehouse anyway, even though there's cars sort of with some kind of local heat involved. If it's surrounded by concrete and there's a fairly high ceiling, it's really difficult to keep it, thermally regulated anywhere near human body temperature.
The thing I've always felt is funniest about this whole discussion, though, is the women that mostly complain about this, right, are office workers. You don't usually hear women in my job. They'll say something here and there, but mostly they're wearing a sweater, or focused on the needs of the person under their care. Is that individual cold? What can we do about that? Is that individual too warm? What can we do about that? Because you're providing care, right? I worked outdoors when I was in high school and college quite frequently in heat and cold, not in a job where I was doing heavy labor, though. Like, men do that. Men who do road construction, for instance, or roofing, housing construction, building construction, anything like that. The men who go out and repair the power lines after a big storm, including, like, we've been sort of threatened with potential ice storms this year by the weather people. They're saying the weather's going to be weird in the northern hemisphere this year. I don't know what they're talking about for the southern hemisphere, because I usually don't get the weather for that. But my area, they're talking about it could rain a lot, it could snow a lot, it could be unseasonably warm, but it could be unseasonably borderline enough that we get it starts out as rain, finishes as snow, and coats everything in ice, basically, on the way down. And the problem with that is ice is heavy. And so tree branches fall, power lines get hit, power lines break, utility poles break, bits of people's buildings that are weak come off. It does damage to your roof, it does damage to your gutter system. Anything it gets inside and expands gets damaged. It can actually damage parts of your car that way too. If you have any like leaks into places where you shouldn't have water going. And so it does a lot of damage. And it also makes it impossible to drive anywhere because you're essentially Bambi on ice, right? In your car, especially in states where you're not allowed to have snow tires, like Ohio.
You're
We
not
don't.
allowed to have snow tires?
They can damage the roads, I guess. But and the thing is, when chains are off limits too, we don't usually have ice or snow that is heavy enough to merit them. You can have tires that are more appropriate for winter. There are winter tires that are not snow tires, and they do recommend that you not have old balding tires. But yeah, it's not like driving in, say, New York, where New York they're threatening New York with a nor'easter this year.
Yeah, yeah. I've been
It's
watching.
looking. Yeah, I think I sent you a thing about it because I saw that. I was just like, oh god.
Yeah.
Like they're talking about places where it is going to snow more. It's going to be heavier than usual. The
Mhm.
men who have to handle the damage that gets done and the inconveniences that are caused. People don't have power. People don't have gas lines get damaged. Water lines break when water freezes in them. One of the big problems that happens in a lot of homes and apartments is that the pipes going into or close to the building will freeze. The water in the pipes will freeze, and it'll break the pipe, and then you have a leak, and then you have a serious issue. And so the men that have to do that, they don't get to turn up the heat when they're working because they're outdoors
Mhm.
most of the time. So it's one way to prevent that in your home, by the way, if you have like a drafty home and you have heat problems and your home is, your cupboards get cold on the inside and that's a risk, you just open them and leave them open all night. So when you heat your house, you're heating the inside of your cupboards, where like under your sink where your pipes are and stuff. That can prevent some of it, but which can save you some serious cash. Open the door to your basement, so that there's some air circulation and
There's
so on.
spiders down there.
Hey, spiders are beneficial. They eat those nasty little blood-sucking motherfucking bitches, because all mosquitoes that bite you are female, by the way, that carry West Nile virus and Zika or
Really?
whatever it's called and all. Yep, spiders eat mosquitoes. They eat a lot of mosquitoes. So do martins. Like if you attract martins to your like purple martins, especially, as the one I've seen in this area, if you attract martins to your backyard, they'll eat mosquitoes. But yeah, if
If
you
only evolution had prepared us to be more afraid of flies than we are of spiders. It doesn't make
yeah
sense because there are spiders that can kill you, but they're very rare. I suppose evolution has prepared us for the existence of spiders that can kill you, and there aren't flies that can kill you.
yeah
But
well,
but
spiders that can kill you are easier to avoid than flies and mosquitoes that
well,
can kill you.
mosquitoes can kill you, folks. I believe we covered this in a recent
Yeah,
after show. Half of the humans who have ever lived have been killed by mosquitoes because of malaria and various other things. and flies can do that as well,
Yeah.
to a lesser extent because they carry diseases and all sorts of this shit. Yeah, no, get over your arachnophobia, people. I know it's easier said than done, but you should be more afraid of flies than you are of spiders, and way more afraid of mosquitoes than you are of spiders. Like,
Besides, if you've ever seen close-up pictures of spiders with their little googly eyes, they are actually really goofy looking and cute.
they can be. They can be.
They can be, yeah. Like just big googly-eyed little murder muppets that eat the bugs that carry the nastiest germs on the planet. I almost died from a mosquito bite.
Yeah,
Right?
mosquitoes just
From
look like
virus from a mosquito bite. When I was 12, I had we don't even know what the virus was. We suspect, but don't know for sure. Equine encephalitis or West Nile virus, one of those, if they're not the same virus, and that it combined with my mosquito bite allergy, because of course I would be allergic to mosquito bites. But
like
yeah,
mosquitoes look like the flying bits of lint. So people are like, oh, it's just a flying bit of lint. It can't possibly hurt you. No, yeah, they can. They can and will fucking kill you. It's like the difference between men and women. People are naturally afraid of men, but when they see women, they're like, oh, they're so harmless. No, no, women are a great deal more harmful than men. What? Did you misogynist? No, yeah, no.
and they also look like little flying bits of fluff sometimes.
Indeed, women will instill you with diseases that will absolutely fucking kill you. Whereas spiders, like, it's a fucking 1% chance of a spider killing you. Like,
Yeah. Well, even
figure it out. Get over your evolutionary niches and like,
in the
use your fucking
U.S.,
brain.
most of the spiders here don't even cause any serious harm. We have two types of spiders that can cause a lot of pain and suffering. One of them can cause infection, and the infection can kill you if you have a weakness to that. You can get septic from it, and that's the brown recluse. But the bite itself and the poison itself are not deadly. They're very inconvenient. They can cause, it's a necrotizing poison. There's a cousin to that spider that lives like, don't walk in the tall grass around lakes and rivers without cover on your legs, and like that there's a cousin of the brown recluse that lives there that people don't know about, and I can't remember what it's called. It starts with an M. But in any case, those are the only, and they're not anything like, some spiders in Australia. People in Australia are listening to us going, you guys are crazy. Because there are spiders that just come right into your house that have bites that can be deadly, especially if you have a heart condition where like you have to be in really weak condition to get killed by a black widow. It's a horrible experience. To go through the night of pain and suffering in the hospital that you go through if you get bit by a black widow. But for the most part, they don't hang around in your house. Like they don't try to be around people. Whereas the what's it called, the huntsman spider or something like that in Australia will come into your house because they eat mice. And mice do try to be around people, so the spider does too. But in any case, speaking of predatory insects, we're going to talk about this non-government organization that relies on government funding. And actually, spiders aren't insects either, but that's beside the point. So what we want to talk about tonight here is this secret signal chat. And I've seen a little bit of argument that this the person who discovered this is making a bigger deal out of it than it is. And I don't think that's the case. Right? Because you don't try to hide what you're doing that isn't a problem for the people that you're trying to hide it from. You hide something if there's consequences for people knowing about it. So Red State, which is a right-wing publication, just so people know, the perspective on this is going to be conservative, and so on. But this publication noted this x.com thread. This is one of the commenters. Actually, I think I follow this Data Republican too. I may have seen this because I followed Data Republican rather than because it was published in Red State. But I think I found this article through Bongino.com. So, or the Bongino Report.com or whatever it's called. It's Dan Bongino's answer to the Drudge Report, essentially. And he doesn't run it anymore because of what he's doing now. So, but in any case, it says one of the better posters / commenters on X is the aptly named @Data Republican, who does some great work digging in data, crunching numbers, and taking big nests of snakes and laying them all out straight and uncovering things that just generally make the left uncomfortable. And that is true. That account does a lot of exposing things that the left is doing under the radar, and also analyzing and explaining things that the left is using complexity to eclipse the meaning of, or the implications of, or the nature of. So that's a good description for that account. She's outdone herself on this thread, and we go to the thread rather than looking here in the article. So she says, major breaking: international actors are involved in the State Department-led color revolution. And so, the characterization color revolution refers to a Marxist effort to overthrow a non-Marxist system. Ex-USAID employees describe how before January 20th, they moved internal groups off government systems into encrypted signal chats, then quickly linked with foreign partners and NGOs after the inauguration. This attempt at creating a color revolution isn't new news. This part was already reported in Notice earlier this year. And so what Notice is, here is their about page. This is a news organization that it's essentially a big news conglomerate, a paper, that I don't know if it publishes a newspaper anymore, but a news site, a publication that has reporters that have worked for other news organizations, working with reporters that have never been in the business. It covers a wide variety of places, wide area, and is essentially it's designed to garner a broad spectrum of perspectives and not just approach from one point of view. So if they're reporting on something, you'll see more of a broad outlook on it than, say, from Red State. So Notice exposed that earlier this year, but that's not the international aspect. One participant explicitly frames it as a global anti-authoritarian movement, by which I will say they mean a global effort to stop incoming authoritarians from cutting or eliminating funding that outgoing authoritarians were giving them. Right? Because this is in the bottom line of this, it will be about money. It'll be about the money laundering that the USAID system was used to do. So they've coordinated with Johns Hopkins International Democracy and Conflict Mitigation Spaces. Again, when they say democracy, they're approaching it from the communist perspective, not from the idea that you have a say in whether or not the government imposes something on you, but that if they can persuade enough people to agree that it should be imposed on you, you lose your say because democracy. So at what point does this become treason? And there's a 5-minute video here, and we'll kind of look into a little bit of this. So bear with me. I want to make sure. I think I have the sound on this on. And that's it. I have it too low.
For the U.S. Agency for International Development, just to put it into scope and scale, it has been around for more than 60 years. It has had bipartisan support, strong bipartisan support. It has had earmarks in every budget. So this was a well-established agency of some 10 to 14,000 staff, $40 billion in procurement.
So I want to stop there. When we talked about this, it's one of the things that we pointed out. Right? This isn't something that Obama came up with that the Trump administration eliminated. It's not something Biden started that the Trump administration eliminated. This has existed since Gen X were kids, and it's actually existed since before many of us were even born. And it's been using U.S. taxpayer dollars the entire time. I'm not sure if I can make this louder. I apologize. I've got it, I think, at the top volume here, but it's not going to be particularly loud.
Every year, we had all read Project 2025. We were somewhat prepared for this administration, and in other ways, not prepared at all. So, ahead of the inauguration, some groups, such as our Office of Transition Initiatives, which works specifically in countries and places that are transitioning from perhaps authoritarian governments or wartime into more peaceful and structured, hopefully democratic governments.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back over that. I could not.
More peaceful / hopefully democratic governments.
Yeah, this is it. This is the thing.
To more peaceful and
Yeah.
structured, hopefully democratic governments.
Yeah.
OTI.
Her ums are driving me nuts. I know I do that all the time too. Right? What she's basically talking about here is the idea that if the general public gets more of a say, that automatically makes things more peaceful. But the general public is what they're telling us burnt down Kenosha, Wisconsin, and took over an entire neighborhood in Portland and one in Seattle, and violently attacked anybody that came in. So even first responders coming in to help people who had been injured in conflicts were under threat. They couldn't even go, like EMTs, who, by the way, also work outdoors in all kinds of weather. So yeah, the peaceful public, right?
It didn't end at the shores of the USA, by the way. This is for all the hatred that is pushed in the American people's direction from European countries like the UK. Like, that all went on hold when the fucking BLM riots bled through into the UK and into the rest of Europe and into Australia and the rest of the Anglosphere and presumably beyond. Like, everyone who only complains about Americans suddenly didn't give a shit anymore. They were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
a fucking criminal in Minnesota died from a drug overdose. Oh, now we all get to riot in the streets because of something that happened in America." Like, and these are the people who it's such a complicated phenomenon. Like, xenophobia is illegal in Europe. I don't know if you've noticed this. Like, we will actually be arrested for xenophobia for any social media post we make that might seem in the least bit xenophobic, unless it's xenophobic against Americans. They Americans are the only people who we are allowed to be xenophobic about. In fact, we are encouraged and rewarded to be xenophobic about Americans, except when it comes to BLM, except when it comes to whatever Marxist movements happen to have originated in the USA, and then it's like, oh, absolutely, oh yes, we should do what the Americans are telling us, what the Democrat Americans are telling us, what the fucking Marxist racist Americans are telling us. They don't hate Americans. They don't hate America. They just don't want America putting America first. Just like
Right.
just like they don't want British people putting Britain first. For some reason,
Oh, they shouldn't want this.
there's a connection there. I think it's because everyone knows the cultural, dare I say, ethnic connection between Europe and America. Like, because America is doing better than Europe is at this point at accentuating the success of the European dream, which has been reconstructed as the American dream, of of being wealthy through your own blood, sweat, and tears, through your own elbow grease. Like, that's why Europeans are encouraged to hate Americans. That's why Americans are encouraged to hate Americans, because it's because America is largely occupied by Europeans, and
Yeah.
it's Europeans aren't allowed to thrive, even by their own blood, sweat, and tears, even by their own elbow grease.
It's because there's great strength in economic independence. And economic independence is the underlying scaffolding of the dream, whether you call it European or British or American or whatever. The dream itself is a dream of economic independence that fosters economic security, and that fosters economic and industrial and medicinal and scientific advancement that benefits the economic secure population of the nation. And that really doesn't lend itself to a cabal of wealthy individuals at the center of a world government controlling the population through scarcity and threats from the outside, right? Through insecurity and unsurety of their future, by saying, well, we will provide you with that security, and therefore you have to do what we say. Right? They can't do that if you have economic independence that fosters all of those things without their help. So they need you to need their help. So they need your country to fail. They need your economic system to fail. They need your political system to be so contentious that your people can't get along with their neighbors, so that they can come in and say, well, let us fix all these problems. But you have to do what we say. You have to give us control. Let us micromanage your lives so that we can skim more money, more wealth, more economic disparity between ourselves and you off of your labor, which we will benefit from and you will not. And in a nutshell, that is essentially what the World Economic Forum is about. It is not about benefiting you in any way, shape, or form. It is about using the illusion that you need them to take away your freedom. And where USAID fits in, so what we just heard her do is claim that democracy, which is when they say democracy, they essentially mean two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, not the parliamentary system wherein people get equal opportunity to exercise a check and a balance on a system of government that could otherwise exercise abusive authority to do exactly what the World Economic Forum is trying to do. Right? She just suggested the worst system of government in order to foster this change. And what we learned in our previous examinations of USAID, besides the fact that USAID was promoting Violence Against Women Act style, gendered, discriminatory, and due process attacking law, federal law or national law, criminal law in various countries, and also male genital mutilation and abortion. They were also using the humanitarian initiative veil as a cover to infect nations all over the world with communist movements, communist efforts at overthrowing the existing system of government and way of life. So the local culture was being attacked. Everywhere USAID manifested, everywhere that the humanitarian initiative veil infection manifested into full-blown USAIDs, that's what was happening. They were pushing communism on people that were not naturally and organically gravitating toward those ideas, and causing conflict in the process all over the world. So what have they done here? And as she's talking about this, you'll kind of get an idea.
Has been a major player, so they pre-organized because, as Danielle said, they had organized during the previous Trump administration to respond to threats to our U.S. democracy.
Right. So what she just said there, okay, was that this organization, this government-funded organization, organized to oppose the government, the democratically elected government that funded them. And they did this in the name of democracy. In the name of democracy, they were opposing democracy. Now, why would they do that? In the name of democracy, we're opposing democracy. Why? Well, because they didn't do what we wanted. So do you believe in democracy or not?
Reinvented colonialism. Like it used to be that rich, affluent countries would invade other countries and impose their nationality on those countries. But now they've gone, well, we'll just invade foreign countries and impose feminism and democracy and eventually socialism and eventually communism on these countries. And that's different, right? That's not colonialism. Like when you look at the CEDAW map of how look at all these countries that don't give women all the rights that we give them. We need to invade those countries, not by military force, but by bureaucratic force, like forcing them to take rights away from men and siphon them into women. And that's not the same thing. Don't you worry about it. That's totally not the same thing. We're not imposing our cultural values on these countries. It's just that these countries have these horrible backward approaches to human rights where they don't give women free gibs forever, and they don't give troons free gibs forever. So we need to force them through cultural and financial means to do this shit, and they're acting like this isn't colonialism. Like, this is even more sinister than military colonialism. Like, you can fight back against a military force. It's been proven in Vietnam and Afghanistan that you can indeed fight back militarily against these forces. But it's so much more difficult to fight back against these cultural forces that are just supplied by this endless funding supplied by the taxpayers, whether they like it or not. And just telling everyone, just be gay, everyone, just be effeminate and gay, and that'll fix all your problems. What problems? What? You're poor, aren't you? Yeah, we're a bit poor. Well, just be gay and feminine and transsexual, and that'll solve all your problems. Will it? How many of your problems does it solve? Well, but shut up. You fucking racist foreigners. Just be gay and feminine and transsexual. You would. And yeah, it's the only reason that the West is able to indulge in these gender cults is because they can already afford it. It's what happens with every empire that gets so rich and so decadent that they can finally afford it, and that's fine. That's what happens to any empire that becomes so decadent they can afford it. And we're here trying to sort of talk them down from the ledge, but these third world countries don't have so many people who have the opportunity to talk them down from this ledge. As long as USAID is providing billions in funds to talk them to the end of the plank, to talk them right to the precipice of the building, like fucking forcing them to jump off the end of it like fucking lemmings. And some of them are going, can we not? No. Yes, you must. You absolutely must. We will force you to adopt our culture. I don't know what fucking adjectives to use about this that aren't euphemisms. Our liberalist cult, our leftist cult, our
the difficult thing is, like, you have to understand what the goals are in order to understand what type of cult it is. And it's what it really is. It's ultimately a safety net addiction cult.
Yes.
Right. Which you can't make a pronounceable acronym for that. I'll have to come up with something. But there's a to understand this, you have to kind of understand. You actually have to kind of understand the history of the parliamentary system and voting rights and what they're trying to undo. Because prior to the parliamentary system, you had a monarch system, which is essentially a dictator system that is funded by the next layer down of smaller dictators. It was based on a landlord system that came from the Roman landlord system. And so what you had was your king or your queen was the decision maker if the nation was going to go to war, buy land, sell land, change currency. If there was going to be a national policy of some sort where the law of the land was, you must do this, you cannot do this, you must pay this, and so on. But then you had the barons paid into that system, and they were confiscating part of what they paid into that system from the people who lived on their land. And that that would then go to smaller and smaller until you had the individual who lived on a small patch of land and on paper had some degree of ownership of it, but really it belonged to the next level up of government. And you found that out if you didn't pay your taxes, right? Which is pretty much the same as we have now, except then you got very little say in whether your government abused power against you or not, how much the government decided to take from you, whether the government decided that the men of your household all had to go get into a fight with the men of the households of France for a stretch of land that the king shouldn't have given up in the first place. Things like that, right? And then King John did a bunch of stupid shit that the barons didn't want to support anymore. They were losing money, they were losing men, and they had a huge fight about it, the First Barons' War, and then they had to have that same fight with the next administration, the Second Barons' War. And between those two fights, the parliamentary system developed, sort of a proto-parliament first, and then an actual parliament. Prior to parliament, there was a concept called a common council, in which the king listened to the people that were paying his bills and that were fighting his wars. And one of the dumb things that King John did that pissed off the barons was he stopped listening. And then I believe it was his son, not his grandson, that did the same thing. And that was the Second Barons' War. The parliamentary system that developed out of that developed out of the bloodshed of men who did not like having their labor exploited and their ability to fight exploited, their deaths, their mutilation in war if they survived, and dying in battle back then. It wasn't the same as it's horrible no matter what, but it wasn't as quick of a death as if you step on an explosive and it just completely obliterates you, or you get shot and you're killed by the bullet going through a part of you that you can't survive having punctured. Men died from sepsis more than anything if they didn't bleed out slowly on the battlefield. And so, while those things still happen, it was significantly more common where you get a slash or a hack to your leg or your arm that doesn't kill you. There weren't antibiotics, there weren't hospitals, there was no first aid, didn't exist, none of that, like in terms of what we have today. So the blood of the men that formed this, that influenced what voting was, right? Voting wasn't, I want XYZ from government, give me. It was, I want to decide who gets to influence in government to determine whether or not I have to go do this horrible thing. Right? And so when men voted, they weren't voting to get things from the government. They were voting to stop the government from abusing power against them and taking things from them. And unfortunately, after centuries of development of that system, of men being able to say, all right, you can have this concept of government, but if you start using it to oppress us and to oppress our wives and children, we are going to shed blood to stop you, yours and ours, right? And therefore, you have to listen to us when we say we don't want to do this or that. And we send somebody to tell you, no, this is not okay. It went from that to when women got the vote, well, we need to use government to regulate more and more stuff. We need to use government to stop people from being able to just freely do certain things, like consuming alcohol, or marrying the wrong person. The regulation became a much bigger, publicly tolerated element of government, rather than a thing that the public rebelled against and started wars because it was being too much by the done too much by the government. And women not only didn't understand the bloody history of how voting became a thing in Western culture, they also didn't understand it as a check and a balance on that government abuse of power, but rather as a means of exploiting government power to get control over their neighbors and take from people who had plenty and use that money for their own purposes, often self-aggrandizing purposes or self-serving purposes. And as a result, people have become so addicted to government as a safety net that they've become complicit and complacent. And the complacence is, okay, well, that's not a bridge too far. At any time the government takes another step over the bounds of your independence and your individuality, your right to retain the fruits of your labor and retain control of the property that you own. And the complicity is that they've become complicit in the reshaping of government into a nanny state. And that's largely been female driven. Right? There have been men involved, but a lot of that is men who have been taught by their mothers that this is what the government is for. It's not. It isn't a historic fact that government was for that, and it isn't a fact today that government is for that. It didn't even start to become for that until King Henry VIII wanted a divorce, and the church said no. So he decided to reshape the church and took over a great deal of its finances, and suddenly the government became responsible for the system that assisted the poor that the church was running prior to that. So, in other words, people voluntarily donating to the church as opposed to people having their money confiscated against their will and just handed over, right? Welfare systems didn't exist really in Western culture prior to that. It wasn't the government's job to feed you. So all of that said, what USAID then came along and did was took advantage of that mentality and fostered in nations all over the world the feminine idea that government is your keeper, as opposed to government having limited functions and the public being the government's overseer to prevent government power from being abused to control the public. And in doing that, they did the same thing that the CIA was doing in multiple nations, attempting to overthrow various government systems and cultural systems. And the result of that type of interference has always been war and death. So this is an incredibly dangerous organization. And what we're hearing from them is how they essentially did what Hal it did in Space Odyssey. That it's this idea of insulating themselves from being shut down and undermining the people that were trying to end their efforts to undermine peace in the world, essentially.
Yeah, this phenomenon we call the culture war, and yeah, I know that's a euphemism for whatever the fuck else it is, but it's not just a domestic issue. Where we're trying to save the West from the forces that would destroy the West, that are pretty much explicitly trying to destroy the West. No, those same forces are trying to destroy everything else. They're trying to destroy the East and the Middle East and the Southern Hemisphere and all that shit. Now we're fighting back against, ironically enough, the West, the forces in the West, the dare I say the communist forces in the West. And I'm not going to blame anyone in particular. Well, I am. It's fucking Marx. It's fucking. It's the communist forces that arose largely in Germany and then Russia and then the rest of Europe, and then it spread to China and South America and Central America and all these places. The culture war is not just East versus West. It's nothing. It's nothing like as false dichotomous as that is. The culture war is between well, I guess you could call it conservatism versus the enemies of conservatism, because conservatism is something that is different for every country, yet the same for every country. It's every country should get to define its own rules and its own traditions, as vastly different as those rules might be for various other countries. Like if the Middle East wants to be Islamic, fine. Like if that's what the majority of the public wants, fine. You do that. If the East wants to be whatever it is, has this worship of ancestral roots, yeah, that's fine too. That's like anyone who wants to pertain to their own ancient traditions, absolutely, by all means, please do. We don't want you invading us, and we don't want us invading you. And when I say us, I mean it quite wrongly, because I'm referring to the government. We don't want our government invading you with our dare I say cultural norms. Dare I say any of the of the oikophobic, cultish behavior that has invaded the West. Like, we at Honeybadger Radio and in various other avenues of speech, like we don't want our culture imposing our culture on you any more than we want your culture imposing itself on us. And it would be so helpful if everyone could draw the lines between the people and the government. Like, just like your governments do not represent the people, our governments do not represent the people. I mean, even when it appears as though our governments are ostensibly telling us that they are putting our nation first, usually they are not. I mean, sometimes they're trying. I mean, I hold out some hope for the Trump administration that they are indeed putting America first. And I hope there's some political party in the UK that has any hope of putting Britain first. like, good luck to
Good
everyone.
luck.
Yeah, but yeah, this is what us lot in the in the space leper corner of the internet are trying to say. Like, it's okay for any given nation, any given society, any given civilization to have their own rules, to have their own customs, and we don't want to impose our customs on you, and we don't want you to impose our customs on us. And it's difficult to get this across when we are all, and I mean all of us without exception, are having our ideals, dare I say, our idealism completely fucked in the face of globalism. And yeah, in every country, there's these globalists who are like, yeah, no, we need a one world government. Wouldn't it be great if all of these different customs, different countries, different civilizations, it all came together in the same one glorious whole? And I'm like, yeah, no, like you already are one glorious whole, namely namely one glorious asshole. No, this like and this is really what it comes down to between the euphemism of progressivism and the euphemism of conservatism. Like that that it has to stop somewhere. Like it would be nice if we, well, I say it would be nice if there were no common rules between any given household. Like if everything was just tribes, like it was in Germany for most of its history before it became Germany. It was just thousands of different tribal regions, like it was in pretty much the entire world before countries were invented. Like yeah, for the longest time, it was just empires, and everything else was uh, uh, just this divided region of thousands of different tribes. I'm not saying we should go back to just everything is a tribe with like a half square mile radius of its own rules. Like, yeah, that had its disadvantages as well. But complete global domination of the same administration is even worse than that. And yes, there is a happy medium. There is a place we can stop, and that place is countries. That place is nations. You stop at some point, and it's at the border of nations. This should be easy when it comes to nations like Great Britain, which is a fucking island. It should be easy to say, yeah, our nation stops at the fucking shore where there's fucking sea around everyone. Can we stop it there? But our government is like, no, we can't. We want to be part of Europe, and we want Europe to be part of Euro, Afro, Eurasia, and all this shit. And that's, yes, I believe Orwell wanders about shit like that. And yeah, I don't know what the eventual answer is, because at some point you encounter arbitrary borders. There's like 1,000 arbitrary borders in Europe where one country ends and another country begins, and you can ask, well, why does that border end there? And well, but this sorts itself out because there are different ethnicities that have been there for thousands of years, and there are different ethnicities on the other side of that border. It's more complicated for America because yes, every American nation, North American and South American, is they are all nations of immigrants, and yeah, I get it. So it's a whole different kettle of fish over there, and this is why we have this difference between whether you are a citizen by blood or a citizen by land or soil. It's all about blood and soil, and it's we're going to be arguing about this forever. But it's better to be arguing about this forever as to where borders should be, rather than just destroy all borders and see what happens if the whole fucking earth is one nation. Good God, no. Like, and people should be pushing back against this idea of just destroying all borders, because it's much like in corporate capitalism. Like, if you have competition between corporations, like with your internet service provider. Like, as many countries have seen, if there's only one internet service provider throughout the entire region, then they have no competition. And if you ever complain to them, they can just go, fuck you, what are you going to do? You can't do shit. You only have one option. So why should we bother being competitive when there's no competition? You just have to do what we say, and there's nothing you can do about it, blah, 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 blah. And that's what's going to happen with countries. If the whole thing is melded together into one gooey blob of what was once nations, like I say, yes, micro nations of just tribes is not the ideal option, and a one world nation is not the ideal option. So let's find a middle ground. We already found a middle ground. And, you know, it is called nationalism. I'm sorry. I know that's a dirty word. I know the euphemism for it is patriotism or whatever. But one way or another, like, we have to draw the lines somewhere, because if we don't draw the lines, we're fucked. And if we keep drawing the lines smaller and smaller, we're fucked. But I think we already found a decent compromise. And it starts with, if you're an island nation, then you already have your lines. Like, it's, like I say, it's more complicated if you don't. But most of the nations in the world are not islands. So you have to draw the fucking boundaries somewhere. And it's good that you do. So that if your country becomes a totalitarian hellscape, you at least have the option of crossing a border to another nation. And it's fucking ironic that we're not talking about the UN for the first time in several months, because the UN, as you may know, is called the United Nations, and I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that the United Nations has always had part of its goal to be to unite all the nations. And this is why so many people think that the devil has manifested as the United Nations. Like, I know that sounds over the top, but it's really not. Like, that's exactly what the devil would do. And it takes the form in USAID, because that's a way of spreading whatever globalist ideas one nation has to other nations. And if it is left untrammeled in its desires, then that is what will happen. So yeah, we haven't stopped talking about the UN. We're still talking about it. The USA and UN are the same globalist agenda. I know I sound like Alex Jones right now, but Alex Jones was right about
about
many things.
so many things. Holy crap! Even the gay frogs.
The trans frogs. He was right.
Yes, the trans frogs. But no, he said he said gay frogs. So, you know. But and that's the thing. The ultimate reason why they're trying to feminize boys and men is because they need to overcome men's recognition that voting rights are a means of preventing government from exploiting you, not a means of providing you as a way to exploit the government and against your neighbors, right? It's something that women haven't grasped. Like, women haven't recognized. Women use the government as a weapon of exploitation, and Mangaka 92 actually mentioned this in our live chat. Men view voting as a tool to prevent exploitation, while women use it as a weapon of exploitation, right? So if these people can feminize men, and if they can create enough households without fathers that are still masculine and still raise their children as masculine men do, then they can create future generations that don't recognize voting as a tool to prevent exploitation and don't necessarily recognize taxation as a form of exploitation and overregulation as a form of oppression. And they will become more complicit in their own enslavement until they have no framework upon which to base a fight against it. And then suddenly, years and years down the road, ideas of freedom and independence will become new again because nobody will remember them. And the people that come up with them will probably be killed for it, initially. So you'll have a whole new fight again to bring about that balance between having an administrative system within large populations of humans and maintaining the individuality of all of the humans within that population. And that's the battle we've been fighting for the last several centuries in various forms, in various regimes, in various empires throughout history. And every time we take the balance too far in a direction that the administrators are become responsible for the welfare of the people, and therefore entitled to control them, the empire begins to fail. There's no way to run things like that, especially with currency involved. Centrally fund it and not essentially create the same downfall that the mouse experiment creates. Then people have to struggle. You lose this. You lose the ability to struggle. You lose the ability to exercise your creativity. And when you lose your ability to exercise your creativity, you stop progressing and you stop living, and you merely exist instead. And it creates the precursor for war, usually civil war, and men get killed. Men have to fight. Men have to kill. And all of those things are bad. We're going to listen to a little bit more of this, and at 9:00, we're going to end and go into the after show. So let me go ahead and hit play again.
Also, terribly organized that I'm proud about is our Gender and Sexual Minorities Employee Resource Group. We are a cautious community and well prepared for. We saw the writing on the wall and the attacks that were already happening during the election cycle, and so we had already moved our group away from the USAID main systems into Signal chats to protect.
So again, like I said, the reason they're trying to feminize men is because it is easier to control them. Just like it's easier to control women than it is to control men. So these groups that she's talking about, these alternative sexuality and sexual identity groups, that's what that's for. They were hiding their activities from the government, that because their opposition to the government comes first.
Protect our community there. January 20th happens. Inauguration. One of the 200 executive orders was to stop foreign assistance. So that was a 90-day pause on all funding. In addition to that, I think we're well aware of that there are other executive orders to stop DEI programming. which affected a large number of our awards immediately. So in that first week, we experienced a lot of threatening emails across the staff, a takeover of what was it, DEIA Truth at opm.gov, which was unusual to have centralized emails sent to all government staff. And then many staff who are under a particular hiring mechanism in that first week were immediately put on furlough or laid off.
That's their next complaint, is that, remember, we've talked a lot about DEI in these systems, right? And how that has contributed to bringing in more of the communist mentality. And it's been an instrument, essentially, of ideological takeover of the government bureaucracy and the government adjacent bureaucracy, such as these government funded NGOs and so on, that USAID was funding. What's important about this is they're using they're essentially using hiding from the state, hiding their communications from the state, and insulating themselves against being governed by the government that they rely on for their funding, and actually being essentially overseen by their overseeing agencies. That they're essentially making themselves able to act against the nation that is their host, this being the parasite, and foreign nations in our name. So it'd be like if you had an organization that you were contractually obligated to pay for a service, and you found out that actually on the surface they're tentatively providing a fraction of that service, but an iceberg underneath that service was full of them sabotaging you in various ways among your neighbors, so that your neighbors now hate you because their households are being corrupted and damaged in various ways by this organization. So you're like, well, I'm going to stop paying them. That's crazy. I'm not doing this anymore, right? I'm going to disband my connection to this organization, and I'm going to stop all funding. So the USAID system was funding a whole host of these types of organizations. So imagine your bank, that's the USAID system, saying, well, we're going to figure out a way to surreptitiously still take your money and give it to these organizations to continue to poison the waters between you and your neighbors by doing damage to their households in your name. We'll just create other fees and other avenues of drawing from your income behind your back, bank fees, whatever, and hide it all. And so what we're going to do is create a set of communications within the system outside of the bank that you're not privy to, so that you don't know we're doing this. You'd be wanting to sue somebody for fraud, right? And theft. And that's what she's talking about doing here. And that's what she's talking about. It's such a threat that they eliminated DEI hires and eliminated DEI systems within, because those were some of the things that were sort of used to insulate against that stoppage. That you can't stop them from doing this.
I am a part of that hiring mechanism. Then within that, at the very beginning of, I think over the weekend of that first week, our senior staff, including our general counsel, were were put on administrative leave. So we had decapitation of the agency leadership. But as I said, we were responding quickly, and immediately we had what's called the USAID Stop Work Order website and signal group was stood up. This was done by a longtime implementing partner who are a strategic communications specialist, and they went and moved immediately to start gathering people, creating community, and collecting information. This is also when some of the first lawsuits that I'll talk about will get started. Within that second weekend,
there's the other thing that she said there that's really, and I'm sorry this is so quiet again. This is it's the website, it's not me, and I haven't found a way to change the volume for this without changing the overall volume, and I don't know if it would translate into changing anything as it is sent in through. I'm sharing on Discord, and then Brian is directing it through OBS, so it's a whole difficult thing. But what she said there about lawsuits, right, that is partly where I get the comparison to HAL. This is a government system. The USAID system is a government system. It is a government funding system. It's like having a business account as opposed to your personal account, right? Having an account specifically for charitable activities in other countries incorporated, which is what it's supposed to be. It was intended to, according to what the federal government said when they created it, it was intended to assist in funding organizations that provide food to nations in a famine, and medical care to nations that don't have the medical care they need, and so on. Not promote abortion and male genital mutilation and communism in other countries, which it ended up doing. And so imagine if your bank sued you for saying, well, my business is shutting down. We're going to stop running charitable organizations in other nations incorporated, or charitable initiatives in other nations incorporated. Therefore, we don't need a bank account for that company because that company is now defunct. And your bank went, oh, you can't not have that account. We're going to sue you and force you to continue funding these charitable organizations in other countries, and you have to maintain this bank account, and you have to keep putting money in it, even though you're closing the business. That's what these lawsuits were.
And there were more signal groups stood up. Like I said, this is an agency of about 10 to 14,000 people. Within the US, we have about 50,000 people.
50,000 people is the size of a city. 10 to 14,000 people is bigger than the population of the town where I grew up. So this government organization employed more people than lived in the community that funded the school system I went to when I was growing up.
Who are hired into the ecosystem of awards and grants that are contracted by USAID. And so this community started really gathering in Signal. Especially as we saw the disinformation about USAID coming out of X as Elon Musk escalated attacks.
I love how they blame Elon Musk, who is a citizen who has the right to criticize what the government is doing because he is a citizen. He can't run for president because he is an immigrant, a legal immigrant, by the way, but he can he can criticize. You are taking my money and doing bad things with it in other countries. I want you to stop, because he is a citizen and he is a taxpayer. In fact, he pays a huge amount of the taxes that go to fund this type of thing. And by the way, they're not directly funding anything. The taxes that you pay today, they're going to pay the interest on debt that your government has accrued in your name to pay for this shit. Because they're spending more than they're receiving.
British government officials really don't like it when Elon Musk says things that might sway the British people in the direction of their own interests. They're like, how dare this foreigner interfere in our process as a country? Are you going to keep letting in millions of foreigners to suckle on the government heat, and get paid to do nothing from the taxpayers' pound? What? Shut up! You're a racist. Elon Musk is a foreigner, and we should not be pandering to foreigners. But the foreigners that we keep paying from the, you get what I'm saying, right? It's fucking maddening.
Yeah.
If a foreigner so much as says anything that might make Britain great again, he's an enemy of the state. But the fucking millions of people who hate Britain and will outwardly, unashamedly, fucking tell everyone, "Oh yeah, we're here to make Britain Pakistan. We're gonna take over your country, bro. We're gonna make your country Pakistan, bro." That's fine, is it? Yeah, all right. Punch the wall. There's so many holes in my wall now.
This is the tough thing about, well, like we started out the show reading our super chats and we talked, or super chows, and we talked about the fact that unlike women, men pick their battles and they pick what they're going to shed their blood over and what they're going to kill for, right? Women do it over having to wear a headscarf. And they make that the focus of the battle when the thing that they're really objecting to is not being allowed to go places without a male chaperone, or not having recourse if they're in an abusive relationship, not having recourse if they don't want to get married and their family says you're going to do it anyway, when they're 9, right? But no, it's all about the headscarf, and you have to make that the focus and make that the symbol, because if you talk about the other things too much, people are so horrified they won't listen. Men, on the other hand, they fight their own battles. So they're not looking for symbols to get other people riled up to fight for them. They're looking for causes to get other people riled up to stand with them and fight side by side. And it's a whole different thing. But because men will tolerate so many cultural changes, so many impositions, so many requirements, obligations, and restrictions on themselves in the name of maintaining peace and in the name of brotherhood, right? Or in the name of multicultural acceptance of each other as, like, well, these men are also men, we're men, they're men, we can be men together. Because they will do that, it is easy for people under the pretense of trying to escape tyranny, trying to simply have the same goals as the men of a country that they're invading in this manner, to under the radar sneak in, well, actually, we want to completely undermine and change your entire culture and eliminate the things that makes make it prosperous and foster your economic independence. And it takes a culture clash that includes violence and includes destruction of the local, like the local culture and the local peace and the local comfort, local cleanliness, and so on, to get men riled up. And so now you have protests going on in the UK. Now you have protests going on in France and other nations where this has been happening. But it was able to sneak in because men picked their battles. So that's their weakness. That's the weakness of men. The weakness of women is that women don't pick their battles. And so when they notice that this is happening and they sound the alarm, they have sounded the alarm over small, unimportant things that aren't really infringements, major infringements, so often and for so long that nobody listens to them. They have cried wolf too many times, and their credibility is shit. And therefore, the entire alarm system that men would rely on to tell them when there's a battle they're not fighting that they should be has been eliminated. So that's part of the goal of feminism.
Women do pick their battles, by the way, and they tend to gravitate towards what we call relational aggression. I'm sure I don't need to explain it to.
Well, that's the fighting style, not what they're fighting over. But go ahead.
Well, no, it is what they're fighting over. Women. I mean, there's a reason that in China, they have one symbol for grief or disruption, and it's the same symbol as the symbol for woman twice or three times. like when women are put together, they argue amongst themselves. When a woman is put together with a bunch of men, she will fight for herself. It shouldn't need to be explained that women are evolutionarily, dare I say, designed to fight over the domestic situation, whereas men broaden out their horizons. Men look to the horizons. Women look to the home, and it kind of works to some extent. That because women are largely in charge of the domestic arena, and men are in charge of the of the outward arena, and so it makes sense that when you put women in charge, they will focus their efforts on shaking up the domicile, the inward margins of all they can even conceive of. And if they want to change things, all they can think of is changing the oikos, changing the family, changing the internal structure of wherever they happen to exist, because that's what they're built to do. Not all bloody hashtag not all that shit, but you know what I mean. You know the generalization that I'm going for. That
yeah, controlling their men. And
yes,
a good example of this, though, when I say women don't pick their battles, is that it's fair for women to say, "Don't hit us if we're not doing anything to you. If we're not hitting you first," right? That's a fair battle to fight, right? For women to make an equally big deal about some guy whistling when they're walking down the street is ridiculous. At the nicest thing I can say about it is that it's ridiculous. If a woman is upset by the way a man expresses himself, he's in the wrong for expressing himself. when in any other instance, women will support all forms of freedom of expression, including obscenity and offensiveness and pissing on the symbol for somebody's religious faith and calling it art, right? They'll defend that, but not woohoo, sexy legs. That's a bridge too far, right? Women's bridge too far is often something that actually does no harm. There is no effect. You decide how that affects you. You may get upset. You may enjoy the fact that somebody thinks your legs are sexy and hold your head up and go, "My legs are sexy." Huh. It's up to you how you respond to that. So it's not somebody else doing damage to you. That's not an effect. It's you doing damage to yourself if you decide that you have been victimized because somebody has expressed that they think your legs are sexy or that you have a nice ass. Right? Even if they say something crude and obnoxious, you can walk away from that. And until somebody does something violent, it is not affecting you. It is simply annoying and, or complimentary, depending on how you decide to take it and how it was expressed. And it can be a detriment to the guy too, because if he's obnoxious and doesn't endear himself to women, nobody will date him. They won't respond by being like, "Well, here's my phone number." If he's a fuck nut, then she's gonna walk away. So that's his punishment right there. That there's nothing else needs to happen. Unless he starts getting grabby, and then you can respond to a physical assault with a physical self-defense or calling the authorities. But women fight that battle as if it is the same battle as the smallest percentage of domestic violence, where the only violent person in the house is the man. Right, where the rest of domestic violence, that's 13%, by the way, of domestic violence. The entire rest of it is either two-way or one-way, and 70% of one-way domestic violence is female perpetrated. It's the woman hitting. Just for the record. That's what I mean when I say women don't fight those battles, or women don't pick their battles, and the result of that is that the system that men use to help advise them on, well, these are the battles that we need to fight if we want to keep our wives and children safe from problems caused by culture clashes or invasive criminals from other countries. That system is destroyed by that because they can't trust it. If women are constantly accusing men of being sexually predatory and doing harm to women through innocent actions or impotent actions, because yelling something at someone in the street is a completely impotent action. You can't actually do anything to the person by yelling. They can hear you, but they don't have to react to it the way that you want, right? So it's an impotent action. If women are forcing as an issue, men must respond to this completely impotent action that we view as an attack, the same way that they would ask men to stop somebody from raping them. Then men don't know when to take them seriously. It sounds like they don't need to be taken seriously ever. And of course, you have years and years, especially when you have feminists going, well, not these men. You can't criticize these men, like Jess Phillips, right? And then in the long run, what you end up then with is the current situation in the UK, where there's been all this violence and it's no longer possible to hide it. And the men of the nation have been doing what they're told and keeping their heads down for so long, and the government has been going farther and farther to the left and farther to the nanny state and doing nothing for the people, that now that it's all coming out and people are protesting, it may be too late, and it's probably too late for a peaceful solution. And it's probably going to get very ugly before it gets better, much uglier than it is today. But in the meantime, it is after 9:00, and I do have to get us into the after show. If this was a night when I didn't have to go to work after the show, I could take us later, but I can't. So we'll continue listening. We'll go through the last part of this because there's some important information in the last part of this, and then we'll read a little more of this thread next week. We may not watch all the videos. I haven't watched all the videos yet, only this one. So I just know that there's more in this one that we need to hear. But we'll do that next week, and we'll continue a little bit with this before we get back to UN Women, because the UN Women thing, as bad as it is, they tried to do this and failed and went a different route to do it. This, they didn't fail at this. They're now in the process of getting caught in what they actually did. And I think it has a higher implication in terms of potential future civil violence, like civil war type violence in various nations, than what UN Women has done. UN Women, the big threat with UN Women is more in terms of family law and domestic violence law, which it's still a threat.
I just want to say before we finish, women fight from the bottom up and men fight from the top down. Now, this sounds like an innuendo, and it is, but it's an innuendo that relates metaphorically to the political. That's not to say that women are always victims. It's just that they fight from the bottom, or indeed the legs, which are even further bottom from the bottom, and the men fight from the top, which is not just the shoulders, but the you know what I mean. And that's why socialism and communism always gravitated towards the women, because it gravitates towards those who have the illusion of fighting from the grassroots, even if they're not, whereas men fight from the top down, even though that might allude to the sky daddy, but it's not, because these are crossed metaphors, and I don't have time to get into that. We'll perhaps get into it later on.
Yeah. I think a good way to Mangaka 92 is very, very good at making salient summaries of a lot of the points that we make. And here he said, men pick their battles, women pick men's battles.
Mm-hmm.
And that is true.
Very true, yes.
Because women don't fight their battles, right? Men fight their battles by doing the fighting. Women fight their battles, fight in quotes, by appealing for help and getting it from men. So that is an excellent way of putting that. But with that, I'm going to make sure we don't have any more. The last Rumble rant I read, not Rumble rant, the last super chat I read is the last super chat we got. There aren't any paid Rumble rants, no super chats. So I will thank everybody for listening. We're going to continue this next week, because this is a big deal. And there's more to say about how USAID, the connection between USAID and civil wars all over the world, just like the connection, it's just like the connection between the CIA and civil wars all over the world. It just hits from a different direction. But it's something that we just can't cover entirely in one show. because we are talking about this from a perspective of gender issues and not just politics in general. So that's what you have to look forward to for a little while. And I will maintain, we will get back to the unwomen when we get through with this, and then we'll finish up with that. And eventually, I want to get back to talking about suffrage, because this issue of the difference between how men vote and how women vote, I think, is fundamental to both of these things. The U.S. wouldn't stay involved with the UN, and there wouldn't be such a long-term existence of government agencies and government organizations like this if it weren't for the way that women voted. So with that, thanks everybody for listening to this, and thanks to my two co-hosts for going over it with me. Thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen, especially Ryan. And good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.